My name is Victor Burgos with D12 Commercial Interiors, and today we are at one of our active job sites installing our commercial shower systems. Today we're one of our active job sites installing our culture marble shower surrounds. And we're gonna go through the details of receiving the product, handling the product, prepping the area, handling the job site logistics, and then also finally completing an entire shower surround installation. For this particular install, we will be working with a 4x12 tile pattern. These are our back panel, side panels. We'll detail every single step of the installation along the way and show you how quickly and efficient this process is. So one of the things we want to cover here is when you get the material, you always want to make sure that you acclimate it if possible to within the first 24 hours of having to install the product. You want to definitely make sure that you try to get it outside of the elements. Now the material can come in one of two ways, really. It's gonna come either bulk packaged like this, or it can also come packaged in an A-frame. Those are the two main ways that we normally receive the material. After it's removed, you wanna then go ahead and then you'll have access to the panel. Then you wanna just go ahead and rip out that cover. And then you wanna go ahead and inspect the product. You wanna go ahead and review and make sure that your edges are looking good. Make sure there's no damage from the forklift or transport. You want to go ahead and let the manufacturer know, or obviously the office know right away if you notice any damage on the product, so that we can either try to get replacement material in right away, or if we can go ahead and add it to the follow-up order, we can do that. But one of the first things you definitely want to do within 72 hours of getting the material, you want to inspect it. One of the first things you want to do when you're at a job site after you receive your material and you get it all staged out, what you want to do is look at the actual conditions of where you're going to be doing the installation. In this specific location, we have a moisture resistant drywall, no cement board needed, no membrane, no water guard. Behind the panels are necessary for this product, which is great about the system cost. So if you actually look at the actual conditions right now here, you'll see that you have a stud wall right behind this drywall. Then you have your moisture resistant drywall here in place over a tub. And obviously the drywall is installed over the flange of the tub. This can also be applicable in a shower type location, same concept. No need to taper mud it, but one of the things you definitely want to do prior to getting started is you want to make sure that the drywallers have all the screws in. And one of the things you'll notice is sometimes, like here for example, you'll see that they don't fasten the screws all the way in. So just come back, and if it's just be able to get it to catch, great. If not, just take the screw out. Sometimes you just gotta find that location. But you wanna definitely go ahead and kind of review the area. And the reason why is culture marble, once it's adhered to the substrate, it's a very doable product. However, screws or even voids can create a stress point, and definitely could cause some type of breakage in the later on when somebody bumps or leans up against it. The other thing I like to do is I like to always make sure that since we're going to be stepping into this area with the surrounds, we want to kind of clean out the area as well. So I just kind of come in there with a little bit of denatured alcohol. Always have this handy. Just kind of spray it out over a little bit. Just want to have nice, clean working conditions as you get ready to do the install. So one of the things you definitely want to go ahead and have is when you set yourself up on a job site, you definitely want to have a decent workstation. Now, most jobs, either you're cutting somewhere either outside or you're cutting in a parking structure where a lot of times the material is going to be stored at. And then sometimes you get pretty lucky, you get an area that you can kind of cut closer to where you're going to be installing at. In this case, we do have a spot where we're able to set up, and this table is nothing major. Get a couple of sawhorses with some 2x4s, and then get a piece of plywood just on the top. You wanna have good support when you have the panel, the cultured marble panel, on the surface to be able to cut on your cutting station. The weight on these, just to give you, so you understand the weight component of the product, is about 3 pounds per square foot. When handling this material, definitely wanna make sure you have your safety glasses, you wanna have gloves, as the material, it is cultured marble, so it is a stone. And when you do cut it, you do end up having some sharp edges, which is why later on we'll cover using a sanding block to kind of break off that edge. But you definitely wanna use gloves when moving the material. There is a significant weight to it. So definitely when handling the back panel, which is the larger one of the three, you definitely wanna go ahead and use the buddy system when moving this material around. We have 2 ways that we recommend on the measuring side. First one obviously is gonna be, you can obviously use the laser level with a plumb line and get your measurements that way. The other way that a lot of installers, and more chances are 9 times out of 10, is gonna be the templating way. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and have Sean just kind of come in here and really definitely demonstrate how to go ahead and template a wall so that you can go ahead and transfer that skill set onto the job site and be able to do a quicker cut, just a tighter fit. That back panel is your primary first step. Make sure you have a nice tight squeeze on that. That allows you to be able to have smaller grout joints on the inside corners.
I'm getting prepared to do a template for the back wall panel. The first thing we're going to do is we've got a plumb line established and a level line established with the laser light. I'm just checking a dimension. Now this dimension doesn't need to be perfect because I want my template sticks to be a little short. So I'm just capturing my height. I'm going to transfer that to our template stick. Okay, for this project we're using Masonite strips to do our template. I've got my length marked on my strip. What's nice about Masonite is it's pretty easy just to score. So we're using our Masonite strips that we already cut to length. We're just templating the wall. Nice thing about this type of templating, you always will capture any out of plumb condition that may exist just by taking the template, tucking it tight to the wall, and the hammer tacking it.
Now these cultured marble shower surrounds come in different type of patterns. They come in a tile pattern, they come in different designs, but specifically when dealing with a tile pattern, one of the things you want to keep in mind is different manufacturers have a different process, but almost always you'll notice that the top tile row will differ from the bottom. And what I mean by that is, if I were to measure this top tile, that first grout line actually comes in at 4 inches and 5/16. When the bottom tile grout line comes in at 4 5/8. So it's a small 16th inch difference, but when you want the horizontal grout lines to line up, you wanna make sure you have the top with the top on the back panel and the side panel so that everything flows simultaneously together. The edges are rough on the sides that are going to be cut. That's okay. These are the sides that get trimmed on the sides. This is a horizontal grout line pattern, as you can see, staggered 4x12 tile. So that's gonna get trimmed off. You'll also notice that this bottom edge also looks pretty, you will call rough. And that's because this is a clay or a stop, a hard stop on the mold. So that is actually achieved with clay on the manufacturing process. So you'll have a rough edge like that, but that's acceptable because this is the side where it's going to be trimmed. Now, if we look at the top, you'll see it's a nice clean factory edge. We're gonna save that. That's gonna be exposed at the very top. So we don't want to cut the top in this scenario. We want to make sure we cut the bottom.
Okay, so we transfer the template from the back wall in the bathroom onto our back wall panel. You want to make sure you have it spaced in the center of the back wall panel. Every back wall panel is going to get a left cut and a right cut. So we've got the template positioned evenly centered on the back panel. We've clamped it down. Now we're marking our cut lines. You can either use a pencil, you can use a chalk line. I prefer a pencil, and you're just making your cut lines all the way around the perimeter of the template.
So now that we have our measurements, we did our templating, we got our measurements transferred over to the back panel, which is the first panel that we want to go ahead and install. You always want to start with your back panel first. And when I say back panel, it's going to be the panel that's going to be as you're facing the shower or the tub is that first back panel that's up against you. It's going to be the largest. Not always, because you do have some showers that are 38 by 38s, but it's gonna be the one that's gonna be up against the back wall. Not your wet wall and not your side wall, but your back wall. That's gonna be the first one always on the installation side. So now that we have the measurements transferred over to our back panel, we're ready to cut. I like to use an angle grinder. Some installers will either use just an angle grinder by itself. Some will use a skill saw by itself. I found this really cool tool. It's a Makita angle grinder, but it comes with a vacuum assembly head. So it allows you to suck up a lot of the dust as you're making your cuts on there. So to minimize any dust in the air. Depending on the job site, you may be working at a job site where it's either an active site, there's an occupied site, or it could be a live construction site, it could be California, depending on what state you're in. You could be dealing with a lot of different circumstances, and if dust control is something that you definitely want to go ahead and make sure that you're exercising on a job site, I would recommend a similar system like this. There are other tools like a Fest tool that also provides a similar system. This one I found it to be very reasonably priced and great for the job. We'll use a diamond blade. I like to use a continuous blade. And what I mean by that, it doesn't have the notches. It allows for a cleaner, less chippity edge when making your cuts on here. So that is my recommendation as far as tools. Strongly recommend always having on hand denatured alcohol. That's definitely just for cleanup purposes and also to clean the backside of the panel just to get some of that factory dust off so that we have better adhesion with the silicone. But then also, in regards to cleaning the panel, acetone and a couple of rags on hand. That definitely, as you can see, just all I do is literally just get a little bit of that. You'll see a scuff marks, like for example, like some of these right here. And then just a little bit of, you notice that sometimes just before installation, if you want to go in and sometimes get some of these scuffs that you end up getting on your cuts. A little bit of acetone with a painter's rag. So after you make your cuts, as I detailed earlier, it's good to have a nice sanding block on hand, general purpose sanding block, and then just go ahead and just at a beveled angle, just go ahead and run that sanding block over it, and it just helps break off that sharp edge. Just makes it safer to handle in the panel when it's get ready to install. All right, so next step, now that we have cut our back panel, we've already prepped our area, and now we've already prepped our back panel for installation by wiping it down with denatured alcohol. The next step is gonna be putting the adhesive on the wall. So I'm gonna be about an inch inside that perimeter. So an inch within there, and then an inch from the bottom. So you wanna be about an inch. There's a couple of techniques when it comes to using or installing the adhesive. Dollops, commonly used across the industry. I like to use the rings. The reason I use the rings is because they also create a suction on the panel, which allows it to hold it in place and minimize the need for bracing. You will still probably need some bracing in place, but it minimizes the uses of minimizes the amount of bracing that's going to be needed. After I do the rings, I want to go ahead and also make sure that I'm running a bead of silicone along the bottom edge of the tub where the panel is going to be sitting on. The panel's going to sit right on there. I like to just kind of run a nice little bead with that silicone. You're going to caulk it again later on once the panel and everything's installed. But having that there allows for some additional protection. As we're getting the panel in on that back panel, you always want to go ahead and we like to go ahead and tuck in that back corner. You go ahead? Yep. You want me to push it in? Yep. So we want to tuck in that back corner, as you see, and then we're gonna close the door. So we want to, obviously, like I had mentioned before with the back panel, you always want to run a bead of silicone on that bottom shelf where the panel is going to sit on. And then now this side panel is going to butt into this back panel. So you want to then go ahead and, I like to run a bead of silicone on that joint where that side panel is going to butt into that back panel. So I just literally just run a bead of silicone on that inside corner before I install that back panel. This is why I kind of enjoy using silicone to install the panels, because I have the silicone already on my caulk gun so that I can go ahead and fill in my inside corner joint as well. You always want to have shims available, again, for bracing. You can either use shims, extension bars. I prefer the shims, kind of keeps everything nice and clean out of the way. You can always just pop those out a little bit later. So the shims help to keep the panel adhere, or should I say hugging the wall, the substrate. You want that to be there while the silicone or the PL Premium is curing in that process. Usually I like to keep it overnight if you can. Otherwise, usually with silicone after a couple hours, it's already curing. It does hold at that point. All right, so now that we have moved on, we got the back panel and the side panel installed. This I call always the wet wall panel. Wet wall, obviously, because all the water lines and everything is on the back wall of this one right here. We're going to be using 1.25 inches. Some may use 1 3/8, and then I'm going to be using a 4-inch hole saw for the valve. Now, one of the things you want to always keep in mind, like I had mentioned initially, you want to make sure you have some support underneath wherever you're making this cutouts at. You don't want to create any downward pressure with no support underneath on the panel. And I am using, as I had mentioned before, I am using just regular standard carbide bits to do the hole saws. Diamond blade recommended, obviously, on the cuts.
Okay, when caulking up the wet wall, it's highly recommended to put a half moon ring above each fixture.
Yes.
In case condensation were ever to run behind the panel, it will not get behind the substrate.
Like that. So now we have actually reached the final panel of the installation. Sean already detailed as far as how to properly apply the silicone or the PL Premium in whichever case which you end up using. On the wet wall, we have our cutouts. If you're ever running yourself into a situation, which is what we did on this panel, where you might just find yourself just a little bit off, it's okay to go ahead and dry fit it in this kind of scenario. And then if you have to do a little bit of trimming, a little bit of shaving off, that's perfectly fine. A good installation, your joints are gonna be very minimal. 1/16 of an inch is what you're trying to aim, or not less. You get a nice tight joint, caulk joint there. When you end up having 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch gaps, that's completely unacceptable for this product. The idea is to have a nice tight fit back panel, which is templated on the back panel, is always highly recommended. And then your side walls are butted up against that back wall panel. Now you will notice that this is a live job site, and you'll notice that it's not a finished substrate as far as the primer and paint. For this particular installation video, we wanted to kind of come in and get the model room put up. The painter is still obviously in the phase of the construction schedule. So normally this wall, these conditions will be already at least primed up. Now you don't have to tape them up behind the culture marble, but now that we got the panel system up, I'm going to go ahead and clean around all the shims and everything like that. I'll probably use some denatured alcohol, just get it nice and clean because we're gonna get ready to go ahead and final caulk. So we are at the final caulking phase. In this phase, as we detailed a little bit earlier, we got everything cleaned up. I went on and swept and also ran a little bit of denatured alcohol, wiped everything down so we have a nice clean surface. Now normally you'll have finished paint before you end up doing your final caulk, but in this case for training and video purposes, or for the purposes of this video, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna caulk the inside corner joints, which are caulked with 100% silicone, and this is gonna be a bright white because the panels are white. For the perimeter caulking, I will recommend using a paintable caulk on the outside, and so on the outside corner of the side panel, and then obviously at the very top. So again, paintable caulk on the perimeter, and then 100% silicone on the joints on the inside of the tub. The pan, in this case, will be your inside corner joints, and then also your joints at the very bottom where the panel meets up with either the pan or the tub. One of the things that I always recommend having on handy with you is denatured alcohol. Denatured alcohol works very well with silicone. So I would just run a quick bead of silicone right there on the corner, and then you can kind of see a mist. So then I just mist over it with some denatured alcohol, and it'll give you a nice little cut, allowing you to have a nice clean bead, minimizing the amount of silicone you have on there. All right, so that concludes our shower systems installation video. We do hope you guys find this to be very useful in the field. Our phone number and information is at the very bottom of the screen. Don't hesitate, feel free to contact us. We're nationwide, so we're more than happy. Student housing, multifamily. Special thank you to MPL and also Sean Jacobs for helping me out here today, and Landmark Properties for allowing us to do this training video at one of their properties. Again, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you at a job site in the very near future.